You have probably seen the news by now. Novo Nordisk and HIMS are looking to potentially scrap the entire case and partner up to distribute GLP-1s. Now, this is a headline rumor. This is not confirmed. Monday, we're looking for more information for this to come out. And if you are late to the party on this news, you might be missing one of the most interesting setups in the market right now, because the story that looked like it was falling apart may suddenly be turning around. Just weeks ago, HIMS was facing rising pressure. Regulators were watching the company closely and short sellers were piling into the stock. And the fight with Novo over weight loss drugs was just getting worse. Many investors started to believe that the entire GLP-1 opportunity for HIMS might disappear. Now the story is changing. So today we're going to be breaking down what this means for HIMS moving forward, what this potential deal with Novo could look like, and start showing you the potential path back to a $70 HIMS.
Welcome to the game, it's the Instant Stocks by Mikkel Kuhar.
And if you don't know who I am, my name is Mikkel, and one of my highest values in life is freedom. It's how I've been able to live remotely for the last 8 years, work alongside 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs and help them scale businesses. That's why I partnered with X10 Day Trade, and I've been working with Danny and the team for the last 4 years to help them scale what we do. We saw a hole in the market in investing. A lot of people try to get into day trading, and on average, from the hundreds of conversations we had, they lose upwards of $15,000 just before they start becoming actually consistently profitable, if they even are in the long term. And we're big believers in investing 80-20, 80% on the long-term holds, 20% on the short term. So these are our trades just from this week. We traded QQQ, PLTR, and coin. And throughout the week, you can see here 9%, 7%, 23.61. This is all completely hands-off with our AutoPilot software that we've developed over the last 4 years, which can allow every investor to have a done-for-you professional trader trading for you. We have a team on the inside that are doing all these trades for you. Best thing is you never have to send us any money. All the trades go directly through your Interactive Brokers account. We are getting anywhere from 5 to 15% returns every single month. So you can see here over a 12-month period, if you started with just $10,000, which is the minimum to start, you can be looking at $54,000 in the next 12 months. Just this week, we've got a client with $183,000 in his account. He was able to get back the entire cost of the AutoPilot software with just a couple of our trades. Now, if you want to find out more, there'll be a link below. Go to x10daytrade.com and I'll walk you through the entire process. But without further ado, let's get stuck in today's video. So to understand why this news matters first, we need to understand what HIMS actually is today, because a lot of people still picture HIMS as a niche telehealth startup, but the company has quietly grown into something much larger. The platform now serves roughly 2.5 million subscribers and continues to expand across multiple areas of digital healthcare. And the business model is fairly simple. Patients go online, they speak with a licensed medical provider, and they receive prescriptions and treatments through a subscription system. Think of it like the Netflix model of healthcare. Instead of logging on to watch movies, people log on to manage their health. And the platform handles consultations, prescriptions, delivery, and ongoing care. That digital relationship becomes the core asset. It's the relationships, the trust they build with their customers. And the more services and platform adds, the more valuable that relationship really becomes. Because at first, HIMS focused on a few simple categories: hair loss, sexual health, skincare, right? They've done a few things really well, and then they expanded. And over time, the company just went into broader medical services. So mental health treatments, lab testing, hormone support, and eventually weight loss treatments. Now, for everyone that knows all this, we're going to get into the Novo in a moment. I'm just pre-framing where they've been and where they are now, so everyone has context before we get into the juicy stuff. So the last category is where things started to get very interesting, because the global demand for GLP-1 drugs has exploded. These medications help regulate appetite and blood sugar. So some of the best known versions include drugs like Wegovy. The demand has grown so quickly that the entire healthcare industry has been trying to figure out how to distribute these treatments to millions of patients. Pharmaceutical companies build the drugs, and then they still need ways to reach people. This is where telehealth platforms truly enter the picture. Think of the healthcare system like a highway. Drug companies build the cars, but platforms like HIMS build the roads that connect these cars to millions of patients. Without these roads, access becomes slow, complicated, and expensive. This is why I'm a big believer and a big advocate for digital healthcare platforms, because they've really started to matter more in 2026. They simplify the process. Patients can get screened online, doctors can review cases remotely, and treatments can be delivered directly to the patient. Let's not even get started on how fast AI is moving, and maybe not to a diagnosis standpoint just yet, but but in a knowledge base, a library of knowing everything you've done, your age, every single symptom and experience you've had with medications and treatments and surgeries or mental health. Like, all these things are now encapsulated, and the way they can diagnose is going to become so much better. And this isn't anything against like doctors or GPs, but you're leaving it up to someone who can be dysregulated emotionally, their own personal bias on the industry or different medications or different diseases or symptoms that people have. They can actually give like a slightly skewed version, where I am a big believer that like AI can get to a place where it can be completely objective in the viewpoint it gives for the patient. I don't think we're there yet right now, but there are a lot of things that can be bolted onto the side of this that can really help them distribute, diagnose, and prescribe better than what's currently happening in the healthcare industry. Also, a lot of parts of what HIMS is doing, a lot of their products themselves, a lot of proactive treatments. We're not waiting till everything is absolutely terrible and shot. Look at the way they're doing hormone panels and blood work, and there's ways you can optimize earlier on so everyone can actually start enjoying the benefits before it actually gets worse than what it needs to be, dependent on how often you want to go to the doctor and check in. And this is another thing, like the friction point of going to the doctor, sitting in the waiting room for an hour, 2 hours, everyone's sick, like all of this is removed. So the friction point of people accessing products is a lot smaller, which actually opens and broadens the access for everyone as well. And this convenience is really powerful because earlier this year, HIMS took a sharp turn. The company launched a very cheap compounded version of a weight loss pill using the same active ingredient as Novo Nordisk drugs. The price was around $49, and that was dramatically cheaper than branded versions. And the move created instant controversy. Novo Nordisk accused the company of selling an unapproved copy of its medication and threatened legal action. At the same time, regulators started paying closer attention to the entire category. Compounded drugs are custom versions of medications created by pharmacies. They can sometimes be allowed when there are a shortage of approved drugs, but they are not FDA approved in the same way. So I want to show you a very interesting clip from just a few weeks ago from Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who was the former commissioner at the FDA, on the Novo Nordisk and the HIMS situation in the GLP-1 right now.
Let's talk all things public health this morning, including the fight between Novo Nordisk and HIMS and hers over GLP-1 drugs. Joining us right now is CNBC contributor Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He is the former commissioner of the FDA, and he serves on the boards of both Illumina, Pfizer, and United Health. He's also on the CNBC Cures Advisory Board. And Scott, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks a lot.
Break this down for us. HIMS and hers, a big splashy announcement last week that they were going to be offering this GLP-1 that was basically the same as the Novo Nordisk GLP-1. What happened? The FDA stepped in pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, first on what they were trying to do, and then on the action that FDA seems to be taking. They claim that they had formulated a version of this oral drug that Novo Nordisk has that is comparable in terms of delivering the same benefit, but uses a different technology. So what Novo had done is they had formulated this pill, the semaglutide. Right, it's the only pill, but it's actually the peptide in an oral formulation. The problem with taking peptides orally is they get broken down into the stomach by the stomach acid. So you have to encapsulate them in some way that you get some absorption of the drug. And Novo had this special technology. They had acquired it from a company called Hemisphere in, I think, 2020 for $1.8 billion.
Close to $2 billion.
Right, that allowed about 2% of the drug to get absorbed. And so that technology is patented. So what HIMS and hers said is that they had a different technology using a liposomal formulation. We don't know exactly what that was, that allowed the drug to also be absorbed. Now, if that's true, then this is an unapproved new drug because it's using a new technology to try to get the oral absorption. With respect to what FDA did, it was an interesting announcement in that the Department of Health and Human Services General Counsel said that they made a referral to DOJ right from the outset. Now, typically, FDA would take its own enforcement action. They might send a warning letter. They might do an investigation, either civil or criminal. The only reason I could think of why you would make an initial referral to DOJ before you took an enforcement action is if you want to go to court. Because if FDA wants to stand in front of a judge, they need to have DOJ on their side. DOJ will litigate in court. So the reasons you might go to court would be for an injunction, a temporary restraining order, a seizure.
We're not going to sell this at all.
Right. So if they're stepping in to effectuate a seizure, they're going to send marshals in. Now, this is all speculation, but I usually went to DOJ after I had already done an investigation. The few times that I went to DOJ at the outset was when I needed to effectuate a seizure.
The people who are looking for reasons to slam big pharma over this will say, well, they're just trying to protect a very expensive pill. let us have this. Your point is this could be dangerous or just downright fraudulent.
Well, it could not work, first of all. It's an unapproved new drug. It's never been tested. I mean, we have a drug approval process for a reason, to ensure that drugs are safe and effective. If any company can operate under the guise of a pharmacy license, come up with completely novel formulations of drugs and market them directly to consumers, why have a drug approval process? I mean, we could have this policy debate.
What's the situation with Hims and Hers? They seem to play kind of fast and loose with some of the partnerships that have collapsed and fallen apart before. How do you read it?
Yeah, look, well, my perception is that they have been aggressive in the market and regulators have been permissive to date. And so I think they continue to push the line. If you look at Roe, for example, I think Zach is operating, the CEO there is operating in a very responsible fashion. He's trying to partner with companies. He's also compounding drugs, but I think they have more compliance around what they're doing. My perception is that Hims and Hers just has tried to push the line progressively and probably didn't think this would be stepping across it.
So 2 questions. One is your read of what happened over the weekend between the two means that you think a deal ultimately is struck between Hims and Hers and Novo, that Novo just stops doing this completely, that they try to get, I can't imagine they're not going to try to be in this market somehow. The question is, how, in my mind?
Yeah, well, they're in the market with these compounded formulations of the injectable. I don't think they're going to be able to sell this pill. I doubt any pharmaceutical company is going to cut a deal with them because they're not perceived in the industry as the sort of good actor in this space. You see the drug companies partnering with Roe because they're trying to operate in a compliant fashion. I don't think they're going to be allowed to sell this pill. And I think that's why they probably withdrew it from the market very quickly, because if FDA is going to DOJ, they're going to DOJ because they're going to take some kind of action. There's both civil and criminal penalties here.
So where do you think this lands? I mean, I'm imagining...
Criminal penalties, so they could still come?
Well, there's consumer fraud issues with respect to the FTC, but you could look at this from both a civil and a criminal standpoint. I don't know if this drug was actually... It was shipped. I don't know if patients actually took it, but once patients swallowed those pills, there's other issues.
But in terms of what the deal is between these companies and Roe, for example, how does that even work? What does that look like? Because there is some kind of discount already taking place.
Yeah, look, I think the companies have been aggressively discounting, right? So, Lilly's going to be in a battle with Novo over the oral drug once orforglipron comes onto the market. I think they're looking for different channels to reach different pockets of the consumer audience. And these sort of direct-to-patient models and these telehealth models provide one avenue.
Right.
And so they're building their own. Lilly has Lilly Direct. But if they could partner with a company like Roe, and Roe can get in the regulatory compliance around this and do it in a fashion that's legal and compliant and satisfies lawyers at Lilly and Novo, that's just another channel.
So what would prevent Hims and Hers from doing that?
Well, they could have gone that route, right? But
I'm saying they didn't so far, but you don't think that they switched horses?
Yeah, I don't think they can. Well, my assumption is they can't pivot into that now. I don't know. The companies are very worried about the compliance around these functions. I think that's why companies have struggled to build their own direct-to-patient models. And so these platforms like Roe have done a good job building this out. So I think someone who could step into this market and do it in a compliant fashion can partner with drug companies. I don't think drug companies are going to have confidence that Hims and Hers is suddenly going to become very compliant. They've tried to push the edge. I think they would probably admit that. And that's my perception. So I don't know that they're going to be the go-to partner here.
All right, so let's actually break down what the former FDA commissioner said, because at first glance, it can sound very bearish for Hims and Hers. But before we even get into the details, it's important to understand where Scott Gottlieb is coming from. He isn't just a neutral commentator. He's a former head of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And today, he sits on the boards of major healthcare and pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and United Health Group. So his entire professional background is rooted in the traditional pharmaceutical system, a system where drug companies spend billions of dollars developing treatments and running clinical trials and navigating the regulatory process. Companies like Hims operate very differently. They move faster, they sell directly to consumers, and they tend to push edges of what regulators allow. So it's not surprising that someone who helped run the FDA and now sits inside the pharmaceutical ecosystem might view that model with a certain level of skepticism. The context really matters here. If you listen to what was actually said, because when you look closely at his comments, there there are actually a few things hidden inside them that could be interpreted as bullish for a long-term story. So if we look through them, first, there's the innovation angle. One thing Gottlieb said and acknowledged is that HIMS claimed they were using a different delivery technology for the oral semaglutide pill instead of the patented system used by Novo Nordisk. They said they had developed a formulation that could allow the drug to be absorbed into the stomach. Now, the reason that matters is because oral peptide delivery is incredibly difficult. Most peptide drugs break down in stomach acid before they can even enter the bloodstream. That's why Novo spent nearly $2 billion acquiring the technology that allows their oral GLP-1 to work. So the fact that HIMS was even attempting to develop a different absorption method tells you something interesting. This isn't just a telehealth company selling subscriptions. At least internally, they're experimenting with pharmaceutical delivery mechanisms. Now, that doesn't mean this version works. The FDA clearly believes it needs proper approval before it can be sold. But the bigger takeaway is that HIMS is pushing into areas that look a lot more like real drug development than simple digital health distribution. That's the first signal I've noticed in the interview. And the second thing I noticed is the validation of the telehealth model itself. Gottlieb openly said that pharmaceutical companies are actively looking for new channels to reach patients directly. He specifically mentioned that these direct-to-patient platforms and telehealth models provide another avenue to reach different groups of consumers. That's actually a huge validation of the HIMS business model, because if drug companies want to reach consumers outside of traditional pharmacy channels, they need platforms that already have millions of patients, established telehealth infrastructure, and a direct relationship with the customer. That is exactly what HIMS has built. So even though he criticized how aggressive they were with the specific product, he also confirmed something important. The distribution layer that HIMS operates is becoming strategically valuable in the healthcare system. The third point he made is about the GLP-1 market itself. He talked about how companies like Novo and Lilly are already preparing for the next wave of competition in oral weight loss drugs. Lilly is developing its own oral GLP-1, and once those drugs hit the market, they're going to be a massive battle for distribution. Now, this is a market that analysts believe could exceed $100 billion globally. And when markets get that large, the companies that control distribution become extremely important. So even if HIMS never invents a drug itself, being one of the largest direct-to-consumer healthcare platforms could still put them in a powerful position as these treatments become more widespread. And then there's the fourth point, which might actually be the most important part. HIMS pulled the pill almost immediately. That's a key detail for this whole situation. When regulators push back on something and a company keeps selling the product anyway, that's when you see major enforcement actions, serious penalties, and even times of seizure. But when a company pulls the product quickly, the situation often de-escalates. So instead of this becoming a prolonged legal battle over a product that was central to the business, it may simply become a short regulatory episode that fades into the background. And remember, the oral pill was never the core of the HIMS business. The core business is the platform. It's the subscribers, it's the telehealth infrastructure, and the direct consumer relationship. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the way you think about this situation might actually be very simple. HIMS tested the boundary of what was possible with the GLP-1 formulation. Regulators pushed back, they withdrew the product quickly, and now rumors are saying HIMS and Novo are going into deals for distribution. And even when we saw the price action come out, when the headlines of the DOJ and the FDA getting involved, the market reacted to the regulatory headline as if the entire HIMS story had been shut down. But the pill was never the story. The real story is the platform. It's the infrastructure. It's the 2.5 million subscribers they have. It's also an infrastructure that pharmaceutical companies are increasingly wanting access to, and one of the fastest growing categories in modern medicine flowing directly through that platform. So with all that said, then coming back to the bigger point, regulators warn that companies cannot market these versions if they were identical to rebranded medications. That pressure quickly changed how Wall Street viewed the stock. Like all the headlines came out, we saw the price action. So suddenly the biggest growth driver for HIMS looked uncertain. Weight loss treatments had the potential to generate hundreds of millions in revenue for the company, but if regulators shut down the compounded versions, that opportunity could shrink. And that fear created the perfect environment for short sellers. So this is where things get really interesting, because when too many traders bet against the same company, the setup can become unstable. And it is a little like a crowded theater with only one exit. Everything feels fine until people start rushing for the door. Then things move very quickly. HIMS had exactly that type of crowded trade. So when the market suddenly heard that Novo Nordisk might sell its drugs through the HIMS platform, the entire story has shifted. That company that looked like like an enemy might now become a partner. Instead of fighting for access to GLP-1 drugs, HIMS could help distribute them. And that changes the business model. It could also really change the narrative. Now we're going to see, this video should be out Monday, if not Tuesday, but we'll be able to see by Monday when this information comes to light. Because as Friday's report, it is not verified just yet, but it's the source apparently is very close and tied to someone inside of the companies. Because partnerships start to bring something extremely valuable in healthcare. They bring legitimacy. Think about the difference between two stores selling the same product. One store sells unofficial copies, the other sells the official product directly from the manufacturer. Which one do customers trust more? Which one do regulators feel comfortable more with? And which one does Wall Street value higher? Usually the second one. And that is why this potential partnership really matters right now. It turns HIMS from a workaround into a possible distribution channel. Another way to think about this is the idea of the infrastructure. When the internet first expanded, companies that controlled distribution platforms became extremely valuable. Search engines, online marketplaces, app stores even. They did not always create the products. They essentially controlled the gates on how people access them. Digital healthcare platforms may be following a similar path. Patients still need drugs from pharmaceutical companies, but they also need easy ways to access them. And that is exactly what telehealth platforms provide. If HIMS becomes one of the easiest ways for patients to start weight loss treatment, the platform could become more valuable over time because every patient relationship opens the door to additional services. A person might start with weight loss, later they might use the platform for blood tests or mental health support or dermatology treatments. This is how healthcare platforms grow. One entry point leads to many long-term relationships. And this is why investors are watching this moment so closely, because it may represent a shift in how the company is viewed and valued. Because instead of being seen as a company exploiting loopholes, it can be seen as a digital distribution layer for modern healthcare. And of course, risk still remains. Regulators are still watching the industry, and the details of any partnership are not fully confirmed yet. But markets do not wait for perfect certainty. They move when the balance of the story begins to change. They look at the direction the story is going in, and that may be exactly what we are seeing right now. So the real question with all of this is not simply whether HIMS can bounce after one strong move. The deeper question is whether the entire story around the company is being rewritten. Just days ago, the market was treating HIMS like a company that might lose access to the most important growth category in its business. Now, there is a possibility the company could participate in that category with the support of one of the largest drug makers in the world. If that shift proves real, investors may begin valuing the platform very differently, because when a company moves from the edge of a market to the center of a market, the potential opportunity changes dramatically. And when that happens in a stock with heavy short interest, price moves can accelerate quickly. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Are we simply seeing a temporary reaction to breaking news, or could this be a moment that marks the beginning of a much larger shift in how the market values digital healthcare platforms like HIMS? As always, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. You can check out my other channel here. I'll be bringing you 2 long-form videos daily, and I'm posting about 10 videos every single day for you guys on HIMS, on everything that's happening in the market. And if you are looking to get involved with our AutoPilot software, there'll be a link down below, or go to x10daytrade.com and I'll walk you through the entire process on how we can plug this in and get this trading completely hands off for you. I will see you in the next video.